Let me start with the moment that completely shattered my understanding of how society views older people living alone. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon at the grocery store, and I still get angry thinking about it. My name is Frank, and at 72 I live alone. I was standing in the checkout line with my cart. You know, the usual stuff for a man living by himself. A few frozen dinners, some canned soup, bread, milk, dog food for Charlie. Nothing unusual. The young cashier, probably in her 20s, started scanning my items with this look on her face like she was examining evidence of a crime. "Eating a lot of frozen meals, huh?" she said, loud enough for everyone around to hear. "That is not very healthy for someone your age." I felt my face getting hot, but I just nodded and smiled like I always do when people make comments about my life choices. But then she kept going. "Do not you have any family who could cook for you? My grandmother lives with us because we would never let her live alone and eat this kind of food." The woman behind me in line, probably in her 50s, jumped right in. "Oh, that is so sad. My mother-in-law lives by herself too, and we are always worried about her. She should really be in one of those nice assisted living places where someone can keep an eye on her." Now I am standing there, 72 years old, holding my wallet, while two complete strangers are discussing my life like I am not even there. Like I am some kind of charity case who cannot take care of himself. "I manage just fine," I said quietly, but they did not seem to hear me. The cashier continued, "You know, there are meal delivery services for seniors, and grocery stores that deliver. You probably should not be driving at your age anyway." That hit me like a punch to the gut. I have been driving for 56 years without a single accident. My reflexes are fine, my vision is good, and I passed my last driving test with no problems. But suddenly this 20-something girl thinks she knows better than the Department of Motor Vehicles about whether I should be behind the wheel. The woman behind me nodded knowingly. "It is dangerous for them to be out on their own. My neighbor is about your age, and we see him at the store all the time buying just enough food for one person. It is heartbreaking. Where is his family?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that I have a daughter who calls me every week, a son who visits when he can, grandchildren who send me pictures and videos. I wanted to explain that I choose to live alone because I value my independence, not because I am abandoned or forgotten. Instead, I paid for my groceries, took my receipt, and walked out of that store feeling smaller than I had felt in years. The worst part was not what they said, it was how they said it. Like I was not a complete human being anymore. Like reaching 72 had somehow erased my ability to make decisions about my own life. That night, I sat in my kitchen eating one of those frozen dinners they had judged so harshly, and I realized something that shook me to my core. Society has already written me off. In their minds, I am not Frank who served in the military, raised 2 kids, worked for 35 years, and chose to live independently after his wife died. I am just that old man who lives alone and eats frozen food. Now, before I continue with my story, let me tell you about my sister Patricia. She is 72 years old and has been living by herself ever since she divorced her husband 35 years ago when she was just 37. Every time I talk to her, she tells me the same thing. She wakes up every single morning feeling grateful for her independence. She absolutely loves the quiet, cherishes her alone time, and says the best part is never having to compromise with anyone about anything. Patricia has never experienced what happened to me at that grocery store, and you want to know why? Because she is a woman, and society expects women to be nurturing and social. When people see her living alone, they assume she is strong and independent. When they see me living alone, they assume I am helpless and abandoned. But here is the thing. Not everyone is Patricia, and not everyone fits into society's neat little boxes about how older people should live. Let me tell you something nobody prepared me for. The crushing weight of silence that comes with growing old alone, especially when the world around you treats your independence like a personal failure. At 72, I have learned some hard truths about what it really means to live by yourself when your hair turns gray, your friends start disappearing one by one, and strangers feel entitled to judge every choice you make. Unlike my sister who thrives in solitude, I discovered that loneliness and being alone are 2 completely different animals. and I learned that fighting social isolation is not just about finding people to spend time with. It is about fighting a society that has already decided you do not matter anymore. The grocery store incident happened on a Wednesday, but the real awakening came the following Tuesday morning in March, when I realized I had not spoken to another human being in 5 days. 5 whole days. The mailman had waved at me through the window, but that barely counts as human contact, especially when you are still hearing that cashier's voice in your head telling you that you should not be driving at your age. That is when it hit me like a freight train. I was not just becoming invisible to the world around me, I was being actively erased by it. Every day I stayed home, every frozen dinner I ate, every time I avoided going out because I did not want to face more judgment, I was proving their point. I was becoming the helpless old man they already thought I was. My wife Martha had been gone for 3 years now, and slowly but surely, the invitations stopped coming. At first, people checked on me regularly. My neighbor Jennifer would bring over casseroles, and my old buddy Robert would call every Sunday. But life moves on, and people get busy with their own problems. Before I knew it, weeks would pass without my phone ringing once. But there was something else happening that I did not recognize at first. People were not just forgetting about me, they were avoiding me. I started noticing it at church, at the post office, even at the hardware store where I had been shopping for 20 years. People would see me coming and suddenly find something very interesting to look at in the opposite direction. It took me a while to figure out what was happening, but eventually I understood. I had become a reminder of what they feared most: growing old alone. Nobody wanted to look too closely at my life because they were terrified they might end up just like me. I was not Frank anymore. I was a cautionary tale walking around in a 72-year-old body. The wake-up call came when I slipped in my bathroom and lay there for 2 hours before I could get myself up. 2 hours of staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was how it would end. Alone on a cold tile floor with nobody to find me until the smell got bad enough for the neighbors to investigate. But you know what I thought about during those 2 hours? I thought about that cashier at the grocery store. I thought about how she would probably read about my death in the newspaper and say to her coworker, "See? I told you that old man should not have been living alone. If only someone had been taking care of him." The idea of her being right about me was almost worse than the thought of dying alone on my bathroom floor. That incident changed everything. I went out the next day and bought one of those medical alert systems that old people wear around their necks. I felt like I was admitting defeat, like I was proving everyone right about me being helpless. But you know what? Pride does not help you when you are face down on your bathroom floor. And it definitely does not help when society has already decided you are too old to take care of yourself. My friend Michael from down the street had a similar scare. He fell in his garden, and his daughter did not find him until she came by 3 days later for her weekly visit. We laugh about it now, but it was not funny then. We both realized we needed backup plans that did not depend on other people remembering to check on us. About a month after I got Charlie from the shelter, I decided to take him to the dog park on a Saturday morning. I figured it would be good for both of us to get some social interaction, even if most of my conversation would be with a four-legged friend. Charlie was having a great time running around with the other dogs, and I was actually enjoying watching him play. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I was doing something right. Then this woman, probably in her 40s, walked over to where I was sitting on the bench. "Excuse me," she said, "but is that your dog over there?" I pointed to Charlie, who was happily chasing a tennis ball with a golden retriever. "Yes, that is Charlie. He is a good boy." She looked me up and down like she was sizing me up. "Are you sure you can handle a dog that energetic? He looks like he needs a lot of exercise and attention." I felt that familiar heat rising in my face again. "I walk him twice a day, every day. He gets plenty of exercise. But what happens when you get sick or have an emergency? Who is going to take care of him then?" She crossed her arms like she was conducting an investigation. "I volunteer with animal rescue, and we see this all the time. Older people get pets they cannot really care for, and then the animals suffer." Now other dog owners were starting to look over at us. A younger man with a German shepherd walked closer, clearly listening to our conversation. My dog is well cared for, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He has regular vet checkups, good food, and gets more attention than most pets. The woman shook her head. I am just saying, you should think about whether it is fair to the animal. Dogs need consistency and long-term care. What if something happens to you? The German Shepherd owner jumped in. She has a point, sir. Maybe you should consider getting an older, calmer dog from the senior pet program. Something more appropriate for your situation. My situation. There it was again. My age had become my defining characteristic, the lens through which everyone viewed every decision I made. Charlie was returned to the shelter twice by younger families, I said, my voice getting louder than I intended. Those energetic, responsible younger people could not handle him. But he and I understand each other just fine. The woman looked embarrassed, but she was not done. I did not mean to offend you. I am just concerned about the dog's welfare. Maybe you could arrange for backup care with a younger family member. I stood up from the bench, my hands shaking slightly. Ma'am, I raised 2 children, worked for 35 years, served my country in the military, and managed to keep myself and my family alive for over 7 decades. I think I can handle walking a dog and filling a food bowl. Charlie must have sensed something was wrong because he came running over and sat right next to my feet, looking up at me with those loyal brown eyes. The woman backed away. I was just trying to be helpful. No, I said, clipping Charlie's leash back on. You were trying to be helpful to the dog. You were not being helpful to me at all. As we walked away from the dog park, I realized that Charlie and I had something important in common. We were both considered unwanted by the world. Him because he was too energetic for most families, me because I was too old to be trusted with basic life decisions. That day I made a promise to both of us. I was not going to let other people's fears and prejudices determine how we lived our lives. The loneliness crept up on me gradually, like water slowly filling a bathtub. I used to think I was fine being alone. I had always been pretty independent. But there is a difference between choosing solitude and having it forced on you by circumstances. I started talking to my television set. Not crazy talk, mind you, just commenting on the news or agreeing with game show contestants. One day I caught myself having a full conversation with the weatherman about whether it would rain, and I realized I had crossed some invisible line. That is when I made my first major decision to fight back against the isolation. I adopted a dog from the local shelter, a mixed breed named Charlie who had been returned twice by other families. Maybe we were both rejects, but we understood each other. Charlie gave me someone to talk to without feeling completely crazy, and he forced me to get outside twice a day for walks. Nobody tells you how overwhelming home maintenance becomes when you are doing it all alone. When Martha was alive, we divided the tasks. She handled the inside, I handled the outside, and together we kept things running smoothly. After she died, every burnt-out light bulb, every squeaky door hinge, every patch of peeling paint became my responsibility. I remember standing in my garage one Saturday, looking at a list of 17 different things that needed fixing, and just feeling completely defeated. The gutters needed cleaning, the fence needed painting, the lawnmower would not start, and I did not have the energy or motivation to tackle any of it. My neighbor David noticed my yard getting a bit wild and offered to help with the mowing. It was embarrassing to accept help with something I had done myself for 40 years, but sometimes you have to swallow your pride. That small act of kindness led to something bigger. We started doing maintenance projects together on weekends, and it became social time instead of just work. Just when I thought I had figured out how to manage my isolation, life threw me a curveball that nobody could have predicted. I was at the grocery store, struggling to reach something on a high shelf, when this woman about my age asked if I needed help. Her name was Susan, and she was dealing with the same loneliness I was facing. We started talking right there in the cereal aisle, and before I knew it, we had been chatting for 30 minutes about everything from our deceased spouses to our grown children who lived too far away. She invited me for coffee the next week, and that coffee date turned into something I never expected at my age, a real friendship, maybe even something more. But here comes the plot twist that knocked me sideways. 3 months into our friendship, Susan told me she was moving to Florida to live near her daughter. Just when I had found someone who understood what I was going through, she was leaving. The emotional roller coaster was brutal, from the highest highs of connection back down to the deepest valley of loneliness. After Susan left, I had to rebuild my emotional defenses all over again. I realized that my daily routine had become my lifeline, my anchor in a world that seemed determined to leave me behind. Every morning I make my coffee, sit on my front porch, and watch the neighborhood wake up. It is not much, but it connects me to the world outside my four walls. I have specific days for specific activities now. Mondays are for grocery shopping. I take my time, chat with the cashiers, and make it last as long as possible. Wednesdays are for the library, where I volunteer to read to children. Fridays are for visiting the local diner, where the waitress Linda knows my order by heart and always asks about Charlie. These routines might seem boring to younger folks, but they give structure to days that could otherwise just disappear into nothing. When you live alone, you have to be intentional about creating meaning in your day. Cooking for one person is harder than it sounds. For months after Martha died, I lived on frozen dinners and takeout because making a real meal seemed pointless. Who was I cooking for? What was the point of setting the table for one? The breakthrough came when my grandson Tommy visited and found my kitchen practically empty except for microwave meals. He looked at me with such concern and said, "Grandpa, you deserve better than this." Those words hit me hard because I realized I had stopped caring about myself. I started small, scrambling eggs instead of eating cereal, making actual sandwiches instead of grabbing crackers. Gradually, I worked up to cooking real meals on Sundays that I could eat throughout the week. Cooking became an act of self-respect, a way of telling myself that I still mattered, even if nobody else was around to notice. The silence in my house used to drive me crazy, especially in the evenings when the neighborhood quieted down. I tried leaving the television on all the time, but mindless chatter was not the same as real human voices having real conversations. I discovered podcasts completely by accident when my nephew showed me how to use his old smartphone. Suddenly, I had access to thousands of people talking about everything imaginable. I found shows about history, gardening, cooking, and even some where ordinary people shared their life stories. It was like having friends who visited me every day through my earphones. The real breakthrough came when I found a podcast specifically for seniors dealing with loneliness. Hearing other people describe exactly what I was experiencing made me feel less crazy and less alone. I even called in once to share my story, and the host was so kind that I started listening every single week. Living alone made me lazy in ways I did not expect. Without Martha encouraging me to take walks or suggesting we work in the garden together, I started spending more and more time in my recliner. My energy levels dropped, my muscles got weaker, and I started feeling like an old man for the first time in my life. The turning point came when I could barely walk up the stairs to my bedroom without getting winded. I realized that if I did not do something soon, I would end up in a nursing home not because I could not take care of myself mentally, but because I had let my body deteriorate from neglect. Charlie the dog became my personal trainer without knowing it. He needed walks twice a day, rain or shine, and he did not accept excuses. Those walks gradually got longer, and I started feeling stronger. I added some basic exercises I remembered from my army days, just 15 minutes every morning, but it made a huge difference in how I felt about myself. One of the strangest things about living alone is how time starts playing tricks on you. Without other people creating structure in your day, hours can feel like minutes, or minutes can feel like hours. I have had days where I looked up and realized it was already dark outside, and I could not remember what I had done all day. I started having trouble keeping track of what day it was, especially after I retired, and every day started looking the same. Tuesday felt like Saturday, Saturday felt like Wednesday, and sometimes I would show up at the library on the wrong day for my volunteer shift. The solution came from an unexpected source, my late wife's old calendar system. Martha used to write everything down, even small things like watered plants, or called sister. I started doing the same thing, not because I had so much to remember, but because it helped me feel like my days mattered and had purpose. Here is something nobody warns you about, When you get older and live alone, people stop inviting you places. It is not malicious. It just happens gradually. Couples invite other couples. Families focus on their own family gatherings. Single older people somehow fall through the cracks. I used to wait for my phone to ring with invitations, but that phone stayed pretty quiet. My daughter Amy would call once a week, but she lived 2 states away with her own busy life. My son Kevin was dealing with his own problems and rarely reached out. The emotional low point came during the holidays when I realized I had nowhere to go for Thanksgiving. Everyone assumed someone else had invited me, but nobody actually had. I ended up eating turkey TV dinner alone while watching football, and that is when I decided things had to change. The next year, I decided to become the person who creates social opportunities instead of waiting for them to happen. I started small, inviting my neighbor Gary over to watch baseball games. Then I organized a monthly poker game with 3 other guys from my old job who were also struggling with retirement loneliness. The biggest success was starting a walking group at the local senior center. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, 6 or 7 of us meet to walk around the neighborhood and then grab coffee afterward. We call ourselves the Morning Movers, and it has become the highlight of my week. What surprised me was how many other people were hungry for social connection. Once I started reaching out, I discovered that I was not the only one sitting at home waiting for something to happen. Sometimes you have to be the one who makes the first move. Living alone can make you sloppy about taking care of yourself because, honestly, who is going to notice? I went through a phase where I would wear the same clothes for days, skip showers, and eat junk food for breakfast because nobody was around to judge me. The wake-up call came when I caught sight of myself in a store window and barely recognized the disheveled old man looking back at me. I looked like someone who had given up on life, and maybe I had, at least a little bit. I made a pact with myself to maintain the same standards I would if Martha was still around. Shower every day, get dressed in real clothes even if I was not going anywhere, eat at the kitchen table instead of in front of the television. Small things, but they helped me maintain my dignity and self-respect. The biggest plot twist in my journey happened 6 months ago when I discovered something that completely changed my perspective on aging alone. I was walking Charlie through a neighborhood I had never explored when I noticed a group of older adults working in a community garden. I stopped to watch, and before I knew it, I was having a conversation with Eleanor, a widow who had started the garden project after her husband died. She explained that 12 seniors from the area had pooled resources to rent the empty lot and create something beautiful together. Not only did I join the garden project, but I discovered an entire network of older adults who had created their own support system. They had a phone tree for checking on each other, a meal-sharing program for when someone was sick, and regular social activities that nobody had to organize alone. The real test of our community came when Eleanor had a stroke and ended up in the hospital. Instead of leaving her to navigate the medical system alone, our garden group rallied together. We took turns visiting her, handled her hospital paperwork, watered her plants, and made sure her bills got paid while she recovered. When Eleanor finally came home, she broke down crying and told us we had become the family she thought she had lost when her husband died. That is when I realized that social isolation does not have to be permanent. You can build new connections at any age if you are willing to put yourself out there. The most unexpected emotional moment came during our garden's harvest festival. As I looked around at all these people who had started as strangers but become genuine friends, I realized something profound. I was not just surviving my golden years, I was actually enjoying them. For the first time since Martha died, I felt like I had a purpose beyond just getting through each day. I was part of something bigger than myself, contributing to a community that needed what I had to offer. After 3 years of learning how to live alone without being lonely, here is what I have figured out. First, you cannot wait for other people to solve your loneliness problem. You have to take active steps to create the social life you want. Second, routine is not boring when you live alone. It is survival. Having structure in your day helps prevent that drifting feeling where time just disappears and nothing seems to matter. Third, taking care of yourself is not vanity when you are older. It is a way of honoring the person you have always been. You deserve the same level of care you would give to someone you love. Fourth, technology can be your friend if you let it. Whether it is medical alert systems, smartphones for staying connected, or tablets for video calls with distant family. Embracing new tools can expand your world instead of shrinking it. Finally, and this is the most important thing, it is never too late to build new relationships. Some of my closest friendships now are with people I met after age 70. Age does not disqualify you from connection. It just changes how you find it. I am not going to pretend that social isolation in old age is easy to overcome. There are still days when the loneliness hits hard, usually during the holidays or on the anniversary of Martha's death. But now I have tools to deal with those difficult times instead of just enduring them. My phone tree friends check on each other during tough days. The garden project gives me something to look forward to every week. Charlie still needs his walks regardless of how I am feeling. And I have learned that reaching out for help is not weakness. It is wisdom. If you are an older person struggling with loneliness, please know that you are not stuck with the situation you are in right now. It takes effort and sometimes courage to change your circumstances, but it is absolutely possible to build a fulfilling social life at any age. The key is to start small, be consistent, and remember that other people are probably just as lonely as you are. Sometimes the person who needs a friend the most is the one standing right next to you at the grocery store, looking just as lost as you feel. Growing old does not have to mean growing isolated. With intentional effort, creative solutions, and the willingness to be vulnerable enough to reach out, you can create the connected, meaningful life you deserve, even if you are starting over at 72 like I did. After everything I have been through, here are the most important things I learned about coping with loneliness in old age. 1. Get yourself a safety backup plan first. Buy that medical alert system, give a spare key to someone you trust, or set up a daily check-in system. You cannot fight loneliness if you are worried about dying alone on your bathroom floor. 2. Do not wait for invitations that are never coming. Start your own social activities. Invite people over for coffee, start a walking group, organize a weekly game night. Be the person who creates fun instead of waiting for it to happen. 3. Adopt a pet if you can handle it. Charlie saved my sanity and gave me a reason to get out of the house every single day. Plus, dogs do not care how old you are, they just want love and attention. 4. Create a routine that matters to you. Structure your days around things you actually enjoy, not just obligations. My morning coffee on the porch and evening garden watering became sacred rituals that kept me grounded. 5. Learn to cook for yourself with respect. Stop eating frozen dinners every night just because you are cooking for one. You deserve real food, and cooking can become an act of self-care instead of a chore. 6. Use technology to expand your world. Podcasts, video calls, even social media can connect you to people and conversations when your house feels too quiet. Do not be afraid to learn new things. 7. Keep your body moving somehow. Whether it is walking your dog, working in a garden, or just doing basic exercises in your living room, staying physically active helps your mood and your confidence. 8. Fight back against ageist assumptions. When someone treats you like you are helpless just because you are older, speak up. You have every right to make your own decisions about your life. 9. Find ways to contribute and feel useful. Volunteer somewhere, help a neighbor, join a community project. Having a purpose beyond just surviving each day makes all the difference. 10. Remember that loneliness and being alone are different things. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely, or you can be by yourself and feel perfectly content. Figure out which one you are dealing with. The world might try to write you off once you hit a certain age, but you do not have to accept their verdict. You still have value, you still have things to offer, and you still deserve to be happy, whether you are 72 or 92.